Hello, Rebels. I'm Glenn Fife, filling in for the wonderful John Najarian. Here with Pete. Pete, the markets are red right now, but we got a little green on the board. Give me a little hit on that.
Well, I think there's certain segments of the market that are definitely pulling on it. You look at the Dow specifically, Dow down 100 points, but you look at the NASDAQ and it's virtually flat, right? And so I think what we're seeing a little bit of in play right now is the semiconductors are actually showing up and having a pretty decent day, Glenn, when we're looking at about a 1.25% move to the upside from the semis. And we focus on that a lot for all of the right reasons. Everybody's been talking about the chips and what's going on and, some of the delays and this, that, and the other. And we've heard now from a lot. As a matter of fact, we might even be talking about one of these chip stocks in the unusual. Who knows? We'll see.
That's right. That's right. We'll see. Coming up here in a little bit, but we got Bed Bath & Beyond as our first topic. Ryan Cohen files the 144 with the SEC, looking to get out of that position. What do you take away from that?
Yeah, you want volatility. You look at any of these meme stocks. That's what I take out of that, because we started off the week on Monday. This was a $14 stock. Before you knew it, on Tuesday, we got all the way up to $30. And then we started to pull back a little bit. We closed the day about $20. And then you get into Wednesday and it's $28 again. And then it closes at 23. I mean, that's what happens, Glenn, when you've got serious volatility. It doesn't work in just one direction a lot of the time. It can go both ways. And it's exactly what we're seeing here. I think when you look at something like Bed Bath & Beyond, you've got a major shareholder, obviously, who's taking a long position and saying, you know what? I'm out. I've had enough. I'm tapping out. And that's kind of what we're seeing playing out right before our very eyes. But you also look at a stock that has 36% of their outstanding shares are short. So it gives you an idea. It's kind of the classic meme stock where it's got these moves, and the daily moves this week have just been absolutely extraordinary. But I think that people should be expecting that. I mean, it's no different than what we saw in GameStop and some of the others, AMC. I mean, there's a long list now of these stocks, but it is about these short squeezes, but they don't always last forever. And when you pull that out, which is what we're seeing right now, then you get a pretty dramatic move to the downside as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the tech side, we got Cisco. They say that their costs are hitting them, but then they come out and say that pressures are easing. So which one is it?
Well, I think there is a little bit of both there, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that we are seeing some easing. We are seeing that the supply chains are probably getting a little bit better in just about every category, Glenn, to be honest with you. But that doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean we're all the way back by any stretch of the imagination. But things were looking better, and some of what their guidance looked like were looking better. I think people are just looking for those kinds of words. They know what the situation is right now. I think going into this quarter, when they were looking at a lot of the earnings, people just wanted to get an update on where we were. They were expecting it to be absolutely awful. In many cases, it was not. And we've seen this dramatic turn in the markets where last couple of weeks, we've actually seen some pretty healthy markets that have been moving to the upside. And we weren't really expecting that probably until the second half of the year. But they did come through, I think, pretty nicely. You look at what they've been doing. They have had some gross margin issues, but maybe that will normalize. That was one of the things that I took away as well. So that's something that everybody's focusing on, right? Is when do we make money? How do we make money? We know revenues are starting to improve a little bit, earnings maybe a little bit as well, but they want to make those margins. And I think they're seeing that there might be some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's take it overseas. And UK, they're seeing food prices going out the roof, and everyone's saying that it's going to just keep getting worse.
Yeah.
What are you looking out of that, with Russia and the war there? Do you think things are going to get a little worse over there, or are we seeing a bad winter?
I do. And the only reason I say that is as long as this continues on, Glenn, and it's funny, as Americans, we focus on something for a while, and then it starts to get pushed out of the side, right? I mean, I don't know the last time that I really heard a lot of updates about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. I really don't. I mean, you're not hearing nearly as much about that, but the Europeans are still feeling the effects of what's going on there. And when you look at the inflation rates, I mean, they're talking about over 10% now for this past quarter, or month rather. So that's pretty awful. And when you look at what they're doing as far as the costs that they've got, whether it's gasoline, whether it's diesel, but also food, you combine all that, that's a real problem. And we are seeing that not just in the UK, but I think we're seeing that across a lot of the other countries where it's really gotten a lot worse than I think we fully recognize. We still have people taking trips. I mean, John was just over there not too terribly long ago. He's out there with the oligarchs riding around on these boats,
Taking his shirt off and everything, right?
Yeah, he's taking off his shirt or whatever he's doing. But there is still, I mean, all laughing aside on that, but there's still a lot going on, and I think sometimes we lose track of that. So I think it's good for a reminder that, hey, look, there is a war going on, and that is affecting things economically across, I think, basically all of Europe.
Right. Yeah. And you know, not too far down, but China looks like they're kind of on the flip side of that, right? Restrictions are starting to ease. Some demand is starting to come back. So they're kind of in a whole different ballgame here, right?
They are. It's weird though, Glenn. I mean, they still got lockdowns. I think that's another thing that probably doesn't get reported enough either, is they're still in lockdown mode. Yes, they're coming out of it, but then they'll go back for 5 days, or they'll do something strange, and you know, in different areas. And they've taken a different approach, obviously, than we have. And they've got that zero COVID thing going on, and they've been extremely aggressive. And still, there are many cities still in China where certainly if they're going to the grocery store, they can go. If they need to go to the hospital, they can go. If they need to go to COVID testing, they can go. The problem is people aren't able to get out and do what they really truly would like to do, which is socialize and do a lot of that. And that will come, but you know, we're still not quite at that level yet. And I think when we do though, Glenn, that's when we see the demands really start to move. And I'm talking about globally, because they are such a huge piece of the world's economy. So I think that will be something that we'll see. It will change things. But all you've got to do here is look at the cruise ship lines, take a look at specifically the casinos, and you can understand there are reasons why they're still not that far off of the 2020 lows from the beginning of the pandemic. And that's something that we're going to have to face and deal with for probably quite a long time. But it is starting to ease up just a little bit, and hopefully that speeds up.
Yeah, absolutely. I know those cruise lines are really struggling.
Yeah.
So John, let's now jump into unusual here. John sent over Google. 15,000 of the September 122.50 calls.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that unusual there, and what you see coming out of that trade.
Well, the interesting thing is we have seen a nice move. Obviously, everybody's talking about Apple, but it's not just Apple. I think in technology, and I just mentioned semiconductors, you're seeing some moves, and we're seeing a little bit more of that option supply starting to come out, and we're seeing some very large buys again. You just mentioned it, 15,000 of these September calls. First of all, they're going out to September. That's a good thing. It gives people a little bit of time. They're basically trading right on top of where the stock is. Stock's at 120. They're going to the 122.5. So it's just out of the money calls, a month out, and buying those calls for the upside. I think that this makes a lot of sense. We've seen a lot of that. It doesn't mean people should rush out and buy these, but just as a backup, as you're looking and trying to do, you know, weave your way through these crazy markets sometimes with these ups and these downs, it's interesting to see that we have started to see a little bit more when it comes to some of the tech areas of the market. We're seeing a little bit of a boost in some of that buying. That I think is a good thing. And if nothing else, I just like to see the themes play out, Glenn, where it's a certain part of the sectors that we see and they start building. We haven't seen as much of the energy sector lately, not nearly as much as we were. We're starting to see a little bit of tech start to trickle in there again. So, you know, I think that's a good backdrop when you're trying to prepare for each and every day.
Right. And before we jump into NVIDIA, I know a lot of people typically ask, you know, does it make a big difference if that options paper that's coming through is more at the money versus really far out of the money, you know, calls or puts? Does that make a difference for you there?
Well, I always view things from the days when I stood on the trading floor, and it's too bad because it's gone now, essentially. Now it's all computers and everything else. But one of the things that we always used to take away from that, Glenn, was we could stand on the floor and we would see all of that option paper. And I can tell you this, those way out of the money calls, I think you always have those in the back of your mind. It's very interesting to see. I like to see a little bit more of that aggressive side of things where people are buying something that's not somewhere up in the stratosphere, but a little bit closer to where the stocks are. And that does get me a little bit more intrigued about the trade. Doesn't mean those trades that are $20 out of the money are crazy, but you know, sometimes I think you just react more to what we call the higher delta when you're looking at options that are a little closer to where the at the money is. that means that delta is a little bit closer to a 50 or something, which means it's going to move very close with the stock. It's going to move at about half the pace. When you buy those way out of the money calls, those are looking for a major move. And, we get them all the time, but I think those are a lot more difficult to find than when you see with this kind of buying, which is a little bit more attractive, I think.
Right, right. Well, the next one's yours, so I'll let you take that one.
NVIDIA. We just talked about semiconductors, right? We were talking about, hey, what is working, what's not. Semiconductors today are up better than 1% on a day where we're not seeing a whole lot really going on as far as the Nasdaq's concerned. But with the NVIDIA trading at about 185, we did have a buyer of the August 185s. Now, that's interesting, and it's also almost exactly what I was just answering when you asked that question, because let's not forget, these expire very quickly. So it's going to have to move, but it's right on top of where it's trading. So as it moves, these options will have an opportunity to move, but it's got to happen very, very rapidly. Time is a big element when it comes to options. They bought 18,000 of these 185 calls in August. They were going for anywhere from $1.60 up to $2.50. So middle it, say it's $2. That stock's going to have to make a fairly decent move over the next, hours for these to actually pay off. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. I love seeing this kind of a trade. I like jumping on these kinds of trades, and it is short term, but at least you know exactly what you've got in front of you, and you've got the time frame. So keep that in the back of your mind if you're somebody who's a part of one of these kinds of trades where it's extremely short. And that, when I say that, we're talking 48 hours short. I mean, these are options that expire on the August cycle, which is tomorrow, by the way. Yeah. So keep that in mind.
Well, before we jump into some sports here, let me talk about RebelCon. I know we've been talking about it for a while now, but we got an incredible conference out in Dallas, Texas, September 21st to the 24th. We got both in-person and virtual tickets. You're going to get a chance to meet John and Pete Najarian in person, hang out with them. We got AJ Monty, Ryan Mastro, part of our gang. And then we also have Tom Lee, Tony Dwyer, Bryn Talkington, all the big hitters coming to Dallas this September 21st to the 24th. Make sure you scan that QR code right there at the bottom of your screen and check it out. Again, that's marketrebellion.com/Dallas, or you can scan the QR code right there. So now into some sports here. Pete, you were just at
He's the expert, camp, by the way. I'm sitting with the expert today, guys. For those who don't know, Glenn used to work at one point in his career. He was with the Houston Texans. I mean, and I love that you did that. And you and I have reminisced about football a lot with that. I did just come from Viking training camp. I was there yesterday. I was there again today. They moved up the schedule because potential of rain in the afternoon. So they did a 10 a.m. to a 12 o'clock type practice. So I left about halfway through. But I will tell you this, Glenn, my biggest takeaway coming from camp is this. The linebackers are shrinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like George Costanza jumping in the cold water. It's shrinkage. I mean, it's amazing to me. And I know you were there, so you understand what I'm talking about a little bit. But I got to tell you, Glenn, when I played, even the teams that had smaller linebackers, they were about 235 pounds. On the heavier side, you had the 250 and the 260-pound linebackers at some teams. I'm out there the last couple of days standing next to these guys, Glenn, and I am bigger than every single linebacker right now on the field. Now, the reason that they do this is, as you know, speed. Speed is what people need, right? It's a passing league. It's this, that, and the other. But Glenn, how about the teams that actually run the rock? I mean, I think that there's a real legitimate argument right now for the coaches who say, you know what, everybody's ready for the pass. I want a Derrick Henry style guy who can smash it right down their throat with two tight ends on the outside, right? And just bring it. What do you think? I mean, you've got some strong ideas, I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's been happening over the last decade. You've just seen them get smaller and smaller. You're seeing less thumpers, and these guys really attacking the run game here. I don't know. I think a lot of it is part of the the mobile quarterback. A lot more pulling your running back out to run routes. A lot more receiving running backs. But you are seeing that push back towards the running game, right? You're seeing it especially with the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. And And then you're seeing it with some big quarterbacks. You're getting some big quarterbacks in here that can run the ball right up the middle too.
Josh Allen.
Exactly. I mean, you're seeing him run over some of these linebackers, and that used to not ever happen. So it's kind of crazy, but I do think you'll see a kind of a return to the mean in a trading sense, right? You'll see that return back, and I think you'll start to see some bigger linebackers come back into the picture over the next few years.
All right, so the next one we're going to go to is, what are camps really like? I was just out there, and everything I've thought they've transferred from when I played. By the way, Glenn, when I played, I know that's a long time ago. You weren't even born yet. But we had 3 practices a day in Tampa, Florida. We were at the University of Tampa. We had our morning practice. We had our afternoon practice. We had our evening practice. We had IVs after every single one of those practices because, it's never over 100 in Florida. It's virtually, it gets up to 90, but the problem is the humidity. So you're absolutely tapped, and you've lost. I would lose on average about 15 pounds of water weight from my body at every single practice. So they put you in ice tubs. They, put IVs in your arms and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. These guys walk around out there. There's a lot of hee and whatever. I mean, I know that they're playing still, but the camps are different. But I'll say this as well. The talent level is, and the physical beings that are out there, and I'm not talking about the little linebackers now. I'm talking about defensive linemen like the Vikings have. And I'll tell you what, the Bosa kid from San Francisco is the most impressive player I've maybe seen up close in a really long time. I saw him yesterday. Yeah. He was beating our tackles for the Vikings like you have never seen. He gets so low. He turns that shoulder. He comes around the corner, and he's strong as an ox. And we've got Danielle Hunter. And on top of that, we got Ladarius Smith from the Green Bay Packers. They're big, lean guys who can come. And you know what they're doing, Glenn? They're putting them both together on the outside. Not one from one side, one from the other. Yeah. They're making these left tackles earn their money, man, because they're putting both these guys together and coming off the edge. So when you're at camp and you're looking at all these players, do you immediately know, because I know you were kind of the hack man or the axe man or whatever you want to call it, but do you think that there are players out there that have legitimate opportunities that are free agents, or what do you think? Like, when you would walk through camp, did you just look at guys and go, man, that guy's got no chance. He ain't going to be here.
Yeah. You knew that because they were sitting on the sideline, not getting any practice reps in, right? Yeah, I mean, you're seeing it across the board. Training camps have gotten easier and easier. I mean, shoot, even when I was at the Texans, our practice facility was only about a football field's length from the stadium, from our offices and our locker rooms. And we would still have to tram them over there. I would still have to drive the golf cart and tram them all the way around just because they can't walk it, right? So, it's a funny thing, but yeah, you definitely know who some of those players are that, obviously going to make the team. And you're seeing a lot of the teams right now making their cuts, getting ready for the 53-man roster. But yeah, you're really seeing, you notice those guys who aren't getting the practice reps. Yeah. You get some of the guys like Damian Pierce out of the Texans right now. They're, he really impressed in camp. They're calling him the next, possibly the next Arian Foster, who was an undrafted free agent, came to the Texans and excelled, right? Yeah. Became a star. Yeah. And so you get guys like that, they're in.
I talked to John Lynch. I had an opportunity, and they're like, look, he's going to be somewhere else. He's probably not going to be here for $25 million. He's not going to be playing for the Niners, but they got to figure it out. Trey Lance, he's from Minnesota originally, Marshall, Minnesota, southwest corner of the state, and played up at North Dakota State for 1 year and 1 game. That's it.
and they
traded up to get him. I'll tell you what, he might actually have been worth it. The more I watched him in training camp and watched his cannon of an arm and his athleticism and how he runs. I mean, the kid's almost 6'5", he's 6'4", a little under 6'5", and weighs about 230 pounds. And he is so athletic and such a cerebral guy. I mean, it's fun to watch him. You know, it's fun to see a
Yeah.
guy who last year he didn't know where he was. You know, he's in over his head. He came from North Dakota State by way of Marshall, Minnesota, which nobody knows that city. But he's in San Francisco, right? I mean, so what a change. What did you see when you were there, by the way, with camps and stuff? Did you see guys from really small schools, you know, that had to adjust not only for football, but had to adjust to where they were in Houston, Texas?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're coming in from either a small town or small school, and you're not making any money. This was pre, the whole deal, NIL deals and whatnot. But and so you would get these guys who come in and they want to act like a pro, but then they start to get that little bit of influence. You get that guy who's also part of your position group who wants to go out partying or wants to be in, out at the nice restaurants and everything. And it was one thing that, as I'm shuttling these guys over, telling them, hey, just stick with it, stay in your lane, get yourself, act like a pro, and you'll be in a good position to make this team. And so it really is a big change for these guys, especially when they're going from something like that. He's not going to the Vikings. He's all the way in San Francisco now, probably away from his family, away from his friends, and in a lot bigger city as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, my last thing I'll say, and then we're out of here. George Kittle, that tight end is not only the best tight end potentially in all of football, and I think he's definitely in that conversation. But on top of that, Glenn, the guy stood outside yesterday after practice for an hour and a half signing autographs. I mean, the guy is first class. He didn't walk away from anybody, whether they were a little kid or an older man or whoever. I mean, he was just I tip my hat to the guy because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what he does. He's an Iowa kid originally, and he's just a special player and a heck of a tight end. But that was great to see. It was great to see these guys who understand. And I know JJ Watt, who used to work with you, is exactly.
I was about to say the same thing. He did that after practice. He'd stand out there in 130-degree heat index and sign autographs for an hour, 2 hours. It didn't matter until the whole crowd was gone. It was incredible. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, well, that really is impressive.
You're awesome, and thanks for being with us, man. I'm telling you, you did a great job. Really appreciate you stepping in. John's God knows where. I don't know if he went back.
He's got his shirt off, relaxing on the beach. It's awesome.
He's doing that clap. Have a great one, guys. We'll see you next time on the Rebels Edge.